Continuing on, we are going to start on your graphs on the second part where it's number 2, graph 2 cycles of each of the following tangent functions. So here's the equations right here, and here's what the graphs would look like. So let me explain how this all works. Notice that tangent of 1/4, well, to find the period we take pi and divide it by 1/4, which would give us 4 pi. So that means a period is happening every 4 pi units. So it's quite long. It goes from if you think from 0 to 4 pi, that would be 12 point something before it, goes up and goes back up again. So a period is 4 pi units long. The asymptotes would be at 2 pi, negative 2 pi, and then we add 4 pi to that and get 6 pi. And the graph is super spread out horizontally. Part B, the period is 1/2 because we take 2 pi and divide it by, we take pi and divide it by 2 pi and we get 1/2. So that means every period is happening 1/2 units. So the asymptotes are at 1/4. So in between here and in between here, super close together, very condensed horizontally. Part C, the period is pi over 3 units long, so the asymptotes are at pi over 6, negative pi over 6, and then we add pi thirds to that and get pi halves. And the graph looks like this. The period on part D is 2, and the asymptotes are at positive 1, negative 1, and add 2 to that and get 3. That's how we find the asymptotes, and then we just draw those graphs in like that. Next, some little practice writing a function of a tangent. So we are going to start by looking at these graphs. I know they're kind of hard to read, but this is a 0, there's pi, there's 2 pi. So the first thing I do is identify what's the cycle. Well, it goes from 0 to 2 pi. That's one cycle. So our periods are 2 pi long. And then for our cycle for tangent, what we're looking for is how many cycles are there between negative pi halves and pi halves. And there's only a half of a cycle. It's half of it there. So our C is 1/2, and so that's the number that goes right here. So our function would be tangent of 1/2 theta. Now you could put f of x and x, but where this is in radians, we usually work in thetas. So the next one we have goes from, notice this one's going to be a negative tangent, and so it's going to have the negative out in front. I first look at periods. How far is a period? That's where I start on these. And I see that to go from 0 back to 0 again is pi halves unit. So a period is pi halves unit, which then also tells me that there are 2 cycles, because if you take the period is pi divided by b, so pi divided by 2 is 2, so there's 2 cycles. So that's the number that goes right there. The cycles represent number of cycles between negative pi halves and pi halves, and there are 2 complete cycles between those, so that's a 2. So our final equation, negative tangent of 2 theta. And that concludes the notes for 8.5. Good luck.